Have you ever wondered why some people never seem to break no matter how much life shatters around them? Why do some rise stronger from the same storms that destroy others? The answer doesn't lie in luck, talent, or fate. It lies in something far more ancient, something forged in the fires of discipline, pain, and unshakable reason. It lies in the mind of the Stoic. In a world drowning in noise and emotion, most people are slaves to their reactions. One insult and they crumble, one failure and they give up. One rejection and their confidence collapses. But the Stoics, those who walked the earth 2,000 years ago, discovered a secret, a way to build a fortress within the mind so solid that no chaos, no pain, and no tragedy could ever destroy it. These were not just men of philosophy, they were warriors of thought, and what they taught wasn't peace. It was power, brutal, unflinching mental power. The Stoics believed the mind was like a sword. Untouched, it rusts. Unused, it dulls. But if forged through fire, through pain, discipline, and control, it becomes indestructible. They understood that the greatest battles were never fought with armies or weapons, but with thoughts, choices, and emotions. And those who mastered themselves could never be conquered by anyone else. There was Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled an empire yet lived as a humble student of reason. There was Seneca, the advisor to emperors who faced betrayal and death with serenity. And there was Epictetus, the slave who became one of history's most powerful minds. These men were not born strong. They became strong by confronting the harshest truths about human nature, that the world owes you nothing, that comfort is a lie, and that pain is the path to power. If you want to become mentally unbreakable, you must stop chasing a life without struggle. You must embrace the struggle itself. That's where the rewiring begins. The first Stoic law is simple, yet brutal. Control what you can, accept what you cannot. Most people live the opposite way. They waste their energy trying to change what's beyond their control. People, opinions, circumstances. And when the world doesn't bend to their will, they break. But the Stoic learns early that true freedom is not in controlling the world, it's in controlling yourself. When everything collapses, when you lose everything you thought mattered, you still have your mind. And that mind, if trained, can turn any disaster into discipline, any failure into fuel. Imagine this. You wake up one morning and everything you planned falls apart. The job, the relationship, the dream, all gone. The average person curses life. The Stoic pauses, breathes, and says, if it happened, it was meant to happen. What matters now is how I respond. That's the first spark of rewiring, the moment you stop reacting and start reasoning. Because the truth is, emotions are loud liars. They scream at you to panic, to quit, to lash out. But reason whispers. It tells you to wait, to think, to endure, and endurance, according to the Stoics, is the highest form of strength. When you endure with clarity, life loses its power to break you. Every hardship becomes a test, every setback a teacher, every insult a mirror. You stop asking, why me? And begin asking, what can I learn from this? That's when your mind begins to transform. That's when you start to see the truth. Life isn't happening to you. It's happening for you to sharpen you, harden you, and prepare you for what's next. The Stoics taught that a man who cannot control himself is a slave, no matter how rich, famous, or powerful he becomes. But a man who can master his mind, even in chains, is free. Freedom, they said, is not the ability to do whatever you want. It's the ability to remain unmoved, untouched, and unbroken no matter what happens. So ask yourself, right now, how many things in your life are you trying to control that you simply can't? How many battles are you fighting that exist only in your mind? How many times have you given your peace away to something that never deserved it? If your answer is a too many, then you've just found the door to Stoicism. The first step to rewiring your mind is to reclaim your peace from the chaos you never needed to control. Because the moment you do that, when you stop fighting the ocean and learn to sail its waves, you stop living like a victim and start living like a Stoic. And this is where your transformation begins. Now the law too. The second Stoic law strikes like cold steel. Seek discomfort, or comfort will destroy you. Modern minds are soft because they're built on comfort. Every moment is designed to be easy, convenient, and predictable. But ease doesn't build strength, it rots it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. The obstacle is not your enemy, it's your instructor." Every difficulty is the universe training your soul, chiseling away the weakness, and revealing who you truly are beneath all the excuses. The Stoics believed that comfort was the most seductive form of decay, because when life gets too easy, the mind becomes fragile. The smallest inconvenience feels like tragedy. The tiniest rejection feels like doom. Comfort breeds dependence on routine, on validation, on things you can lose. But the Stoic trains himself to live without what the world calls unnecessary, to detach from luxury, from approval, from the constant need for ease. They practiced voluntary hardship. Seneca slept on the floor when he could have slept on silk. Epictetus, once a slave, trained himself to find calm even in hunger and pain. Marcus Aurelius rose before dawn to write, reflect, and remind himself, you could die today. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. They weren't chasing pain, they were building power, because pain is the only material that forges the unbreakable. You want to know why most people never grow? Because they run from discomfort. They run from silence. They run from struggle. But what you run from only grows stronger. The Stoic doesn't run. He walks straight into the fire and says, "Eat me." Because he knows that every ounce of pain endured consciously becomes armor. Every challenge faced willingly becomes wisdom. Let's be honest, fool. The reason so many minds collapse under pressure is not because life got harder, but because they never trained for it. You can't expect mental toughness when your daily habits revolve around avoiding discomfort. You can't expect emotional control when you've built your life on instant gratification. The Stoic law is brutal because it forces you to see how much of your suffering comes from your fear of suffering. Start with the little things. Take a cold shower not to punish yourself, but to remember that you can. Walk without your phone to realize you don't need distraction to exist. Face criticism without defending yourself, just to test the weight of silence. These aren't acts of punishment. The Stoics understood a truth we've forgotten, that life itself is not supposed to be comfortable. The body grows through resistance. The mind evolves through struggle. The soul awakens through loss. And the man who hides from these will live a long life, but never a full one. Seneca once said, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest fare and with rough clothing, and ask yourself, is this the condition that I feared? Because when you taste discomfort and survive, fear loses its power." When you willingly let go of what you think you need, you begin to see how little you truly require to be free. Comfort is the silent killer of greatness. It disguises itself as peace, but it's really decay. And the Stoic refuses to rot. He trains his mind to love the sting of the cold, the weight of pressure, the silence of solitude. Because within those moments, those brutal, lonely moments, he finds clarity. Pain reveals what pleasure hides. Discomfort strips away illusions. And when all illusions are gone, only truth remains. That truth is simple. The man who can sit calmly in chaos, who can smile in discomfort, who can move forward when others retreat, that man has already won, no matter what happens next. So, ask yourself, when was the last time you did something uncomfortable on purpose? When was the last time you faced hardship and said, "I choose this"? Because if you can learn to do that, if you can find calm within the storm, you've already stepped into the world the Stoics built, a world where the mind is no longer a prisoner of comfort, but the master of it, my ease. And from that mastery comes the third law, one even more ruthless, one that separates the thinkers from the truly powerful. Now the law 2, the brutal law of discomfort. The second Stoic law strikes like cold steel. Seek discomfort or comfort will destroy you. Modern minds are soft because they're built on comfort. Every moment is designed to be easy, convenient, and predictable. But ease doesn't build strength. It rots it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. The obstacle is not your enemy. It's your instructor." Every difficulty is the universe training your soul, chiseling away the weakness, and revealing who you truly are beneath all the excuses. The Stoics believed that comfort was the most seductive form of decay. Because when life gets too easy, the mind becomes fragile. The smallest inconvenience feels like tragedy. The tiniest rejection feels like doom. Comfort breeds dependence on routine, on validation, on things you can lose. But the Stoic trains himself to live without what the world calls unnecessary, to detach from luxury, from approval, from the constant need for ease. They practiced voluntary hardship. Seneca slept on the floor when he could have slept on silk. Epictetus, once a slave, trained himself to find calm even in hunger and pain. Marcus Aurelius rose before dawn to write, reflect, and remind himself. You could die today. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. They weren't chasing pain, they were building power. Because pain is the only material that forges the unbreakable. You want to know why most people never grow? Because they run from discomfort, they run from silence, they run from struggle. But what you run from only grows stronger. The Stoic doesn't run. He walks straight into the fire and says, "Teach me," because he knows that every ounce of pain endured consciously becomes armor. Every challenge faced willingly becomes wisdom. Let's be honest, fool. The reason so many minds collapse under pressure is not because life got harder, but because they never trained for it. You can't expect mental toughness when your daily habits revolve around avoiding discomfort. You can't expect emotional control when you've built your life on instant gratification. The Stoic Law is brutal because it forces you to see how much of your suffering comes from your fear of suffering. Start with the little things. Take a cold shower, not to punish yourself, but to remember that you can. Walk without your phone to realize you don't need distraction to exist. Face criticism without defending yourself, just to test the weight of silence. These aren't acts of punishment. They are acts of punishment. They are acts of liberation. Each time you resist comfort, you weaken its control over it. Each time you choose hardship voluntarily, you remind yourself that pain is temporary, but power is permanent. The Stoics understood a truth we've forgotten, that life itself is not supposed to be comfortable. The body grows through resistance. The mind evolves through struggle. The soul awakens through loss, and the man who hides from these will live a long life, but never a full one. Seneca once said, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest fare and with rough clothing, and ask yourself, is this the condition that I feared?" Because when you taste discomfort and survive, fear loses its power. When you willingly let go of what you think you need, you begin to see how little you truly require to be free. Comfort is the silent killer of greatness. It disguises itself as peace, but it's really decay. And the Stoic refuses to rot. He trains his mind to love the sting of the cold, the weight of pressure, the silence of solitude. Because within those moments, those brutal, lonely moments, he finds clarity. Pain reveals what pleasure hides. Discomfort strips away illusions. And when all illusions are gone, only truth remains. That truth is simple. The man who can sit calmly in chaos, who can smile in discomfort, who can move forward when others retreat, that man has already won no matter what happens next. So ask yourself, when was the last time you did something uncomfortable on purpose? When was the last time you faced hardship and said, "I choose this"? Because if you can learn to do that, if you can find calm within the storm, you've already stepped into the world the Stoics built, a world where the mind is no longer a prisoner of comfort, but the master of it. And from that mastery comes the third law, one even more ruthless, one that separates the thinkers from the truly powerful, now the law 3. The law of indifference. Nothing and no one owes you anything. The third Stoic law is the most brutal of them all because it tears down the greatest illusion the human mind clings to. The world owes me. It doesn't. It never did. The Stoics believe that the root of all disappointment is expectation. The moment you expect life to be fair, people to be kind, or success to be guaranteed, you've already lost control of your peace. The Stoic frees himself by accepting that the universe makes no promises. The sun will rise whether you're ready or not. The world will move forward whether you win or fail. And no one, not the gods, not fate, not society, owes you happiness. When you finally see that truth, something inside you breaks. And then something stronger is born in its place. Because once you stop expecting, you stop being controlled. Once you stop demanding from the world, you start commanding yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Expecting the world to treat you fairly because you are a good person is like expecting a lion not to eat you because you are a vegetarian." That's the cold reality of existence. Nature doesn't care about fairness. It cares about survival, strength, and balance. And those who adapt to it, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, rise above those who wait for life to be kind. The Stoics trained themselves to find power not in what they received, but in what they gave. If the world turned against them, they stood still. If people betrayed them, they practiced gratitude for the lesson. If fate was cruel, they sharpened their reason instead of their rage. This isn't weakness, it's indifference born of strength. Because true indifference is not apathy, it's power. The man who can look at loss and say, "I lose nothing that was ever mine," is untouchable. The woman who can face betrayal and say, "You've only revealed your nature, not changed mine," is free. This is the essence of Stoicism, to live without emotional debt. When you walk through life thinking the world owes you peace, comfort, or success, you walk as a beggar. You depend on others for your sense of worth. But when you realize that no one owes you anything, not even an apology, you stop begging. You start building. You build inner wealth. You build emotional armor. You build your own meaning. Seneca said, "He is a great man who uses earthenware dishes as if they were silver, but he is equally great who uses silver as if it were earthenware." The Stoic doesn't care whether he eats on gold or clay, whether he's praised or ignored, loved or hated. Because his worth isn't in how the world treats him. It's in how he treats himself and others despite it all. Think about it, fool. How much of your frustration, sadness, or anger comes from unmet expectations? You expected them to understand. You expected life to go as planned. You expected things to be easier, fairer, softer. But they weren't, and that's exactly how it was always meant to be. When you accept this law, life stops feeling like an enemy and starts becoming your greatest teacher. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start saying, "Why not me?" Because every pain, every betrayal, every storm becomes another exercise in strength. The Stoic wakes up each day prepared for loss, not because he is pessimistic, but because he is realistic. He says to himself, "Today I may face anger, envy, betrayal, or ingratitude, but none of it will touch me unless I allow it." That mindset doesn't make life colder, it makes it clearer. When nothing is owed to you, everything becomes a gift. When no one is required to love you, every act of kindness becomes precious. When the world's indifference no longer wounds you, its chaos can no longer control you. And this is the paradox of the third Stoic law. The moment you stop expecting from life, life begins to give you everything. Because you no longer approach it with need, you approach it with power. And with that power, the Stoic moves toward the next law, one that dismantles the very foundation of fear itself. Now the law 4, the law of death. Fear nothing, you cannot escape the fourth Stoic law as the blade that cuts through illusion. Memento mori, remember, you will die. At first, those words sound dark, even cruel. But to the Stoic, they are not a curse. They are freedom itself. Because the one who accepts death loses fear, and the one who loses fear gains power over life itself. Every fear you've ever had, fear of failure, rejection, judgment, loss, springs from the same source, the fear of death, the fear of ending, of disappearing, of losing control. But the Stoics look death in the face every day, not with sorrow, but with clarity. They reminded themselves, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. That's not morbid. It's awakening. Most people live as if they'll never die. They delay their dreams, postpone their discipline, and waste their days drowning in distraction. They chase validation instead of virtue, comfort instead of character. They say, one day I'll change, but the Stoic knows one day is not promised. Only this moment is. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, wrote to himself nightly, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." He was reminding himself that time is not guaranteed, and that procrastination is the slowest form of suicide. To live fully, you must remember that you will die, because once you do, you start to see what truly matters. The opinions of others fade. The fear of embarrassment dissolves. The weight of the past lightens. You stop performing for the world and start living with intention. Seneca said, "Rehearse death." That sounds strange until you understand what he meant. He wasn't asking you to be morbid. He was asking you to train your soul to face the ultimate truth before it faces you. Because when you accept death, you become untouchable. No loss can destroy you. No insult can shake you. No failure can define you. Memento mori is not about sadness. It's about urgency. It reminds you that every sunrise is borrowed time. Every breath is a gift you've done nothing to earn. And when you live with that awareness, your focus sharpens. You stop wasting your energy on things that don't matter. You stop postponing the things that do. Think about it, fool. How many people do you know who are truly alive? Not just existing, but awake, aware and intentional. Most people are sleepwalking through life, terrified of dying, yet never truly living. The Stoic flips that. He dies before he dies, so that when death comes, it finds nothing left to take. When you remember your mortality, you begin to see the beauty in impermanence. You appreciate the fleeting. You stop clinging. You realize that nothing belongs to you. Not your possessions, not your success, not even your body. Everything is on loan. Everything will return to where it came from. And that realization doesn't make life colder. It makes it sacred. Because the Stoic doesn't just live, he lives with fire. Every day becomes a battlefield for meaning. Every decision becomes a question. If this were my last day, would this still matter? If the answer is no, he lets it go. Instantly. That's how you become mentally unbreakable. Not by denying death, but by walking with it. When you know that time is short, you stop living for validation and start living for virtue. When you know that the end can come at any moment, you stop hesitating and start acting. And when fear finally comes knocking, you open the door and say, I've been expecting you. Because you've trained for this. You've rehearsed for this. You've lived ready. That is the essence of Stoic courage, not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. And with fear destroyed, the Stoic mind ascends to the next brutal law, the one that turns pain itself into strength. Now the law 5, the law of pain. Transform suffering into strength, the 5th Stoic law, is simple, but merciless. What stands in the way becomes the way. Every pain you feel, every loss, every rejection, every defeat, it all has one purpose: to build you, but only if you let it. The Stoic doesn't beg the universe to remove pain. He whispers something far more dangerous: give me the strength to face it. Because he understands a truth that most people spend their entire lives running from. Pain is the price of power. The world will break you down, not to destroy you, but to see what you're made of. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, war, plague, and loneliness. Yet he wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Those are not the words of a man untouched by hardship. They are the words of a man who learned to use hardship. You see, fool, life will test you. Sometimes it will burn you alive. Sometimes it will strip you of everything you love. And in that fire, you have two choices: curse it or forge yourself through it. The Stoic always chooses the latter. To the weak, pain is punishment. To the strong, pain is instruction. Pain reveals your limits so you can surpass them. It humbles the ego. It clarifies what truly matters. It exposes false priorities and shallow attachments. Pain isn't your enemy. It's the most honest friend you'll ever have. The Stoics believed that suffering was neutral. It had no meaning on its own, only the meaning you give it. Two people can face the same tragedy. One collapses, the other transforms. The difference? Perception. Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Those words are the foundation of Stoic resilience, because if your mind can turn pain into purpose, then pain can no longer control you. Think of your struggles. Every heartbreak, every loss, every night you thought you'd never recover. What if all of it was training? What if the universe wasn't punishing you but preparing you? That's how the Stoic sees it, not as cruelty but as conditioning. Every scar becomes proof of survival. Every failure becomes evidence of endurance. Pain is not a signal to stop, it's a signal to adapt. When you hit your breaking point, the Stoic mind whispers, good. Now I know where to rebuild. The greatest mistake people make is waiting for life to get easier. It won't. You don't get stronger by avoiding the weight, you get stronger by lifting it. Every difficulty you conquer increases your capacity for more. Every battle you survive expands your threshold for pain. And over time, what once felt unbearable becomes ordinary. That's how the mind evolves, through exposure, not avoidance. The Stoic doesn't seek pain, but he never runs from it either. He welcomes it as a teacher, listens to its lessons, and then moves forward with deeper understanding. To suffer well, that's the Stoic art. Not to live without pain, but to use pain wisely. Seneca wrote, a fire tests gold, adversity tests brave men. The fire doesn't destroy the gold, it refines it. The Stoic lives the same way. Every trial, every wound, every loss, all of it becomes fuel. And when the world looks at him, expecting to see a broken man, they see something else entirely. Someone who is burned and yet still stands, glowing with quiet strength. Pain, when embraced, becomes transformation. When you no longer resist it, it loses its ability to control you. When you learn from it, it gives you clarity. And when you endure it, it gives you power. That's why the Stoic says, don't pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a hard one. Because only through endurance can the mind be rewired. Only through pain can the soul become unbreakable. And when pain no longer frightens you, when you can stand in the storm without trembling, you're ready for the next brutal Stoic law, the one that teaches you how to destroy the ego itself and see the world as it truly is. Now the Law 6. The law of ego. You are not as important as you think. The sixth Stoic law cuts deeper than any sword. You are but a small part of the whole. It sounds simple, almost poetic. But beneath those words lies a brutal dismantling of the self, a destruction of everything ego holds dear. Because the truth is, most of our suffering doesn't come from what happens to us. It comes from how deeply we believe the world should revolve around us. The Stoics saw ego as the root of chaos, the invisible tyrant that blinds men with pride, arrogance, and self-importance. Ego whispers that you deserve more, that you've been wronged, that the world must notice you, praise you, validate you. And yet, nothing enslaves the mind faster than the need to be seen. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Soon you will have forgotten all things, and all things will have forgotten you." For an emperor to write those words is not despair, it's liberation. Because once you accept that your life is a blink in eternity, you stop living for applause and start living for purpose. The Stoic understands that ego is a liar. It feeds on comparison and dies in humility. It makes you chase things that don't matter and ignore the things that do. It traps you in constant judgment of others and of yourself. But the Stoic trains to silence it. He wakes each day reminding himself, I am not the center of the universe. I am a fragment of it. This isn't weakness, it's strength. When you stop thinking of yourself as special, you stop fearing failure. When you stop demanding recognition, you start finding peace. When you stop chasing importance, you start creating meaning. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The ego feeds that imagination. It exaggerates insult, amplifies fear, and poisons gratitude. The Stoic kills it with awareness. He observes his emotions like clouds passing through the sky, never attaching, never clinging. He reminds himself, I am only a man, nothing more. Think about it, fool. How many times has your ego made you miserable? When someone ignored you and your mind said, they disrespected me. When you failed and your pride whispered, we're worthless. When someone succeeded and your envy screamed, that should have been me. None of those are real wounds. They're illusions. Wounds of perception. The Stoic destroys them with one weapon, humility. Not the weak kind, the powerful kind. The humility that knows exactly what it is capable of, but doesn't need to prove it. The humility that doesn't need to be right, doesn't need to be admired, doesn't need to be known. Because ego is the mind's addiction to control. And when you release it, you become light, free to grow, to learn, to adapt. The Stoic lives by reason, not recognition. He acts with virtue, not vanity. He seeks improvement, not image. The irony is this: the smaller you make your ego, the greater your power becomes, because then you're no longer distracted by pride, insult, or the endless hunger for validation. You move quietly but with purpose. You speak less but mean more. You don't chase success. You attract it by mastering yourself. Marcus Aurelius often wrote in his journal, as if speaking to his own arrogance, you could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow. He wasn't scolding himself. He was reminding his soul to act, not perform. To live by Stoic law is to abandon the theater of ego and step into the simplicity of truth. You are not the center of the world, and that's the most freeing realization you can ever have. Because once the need to prove yourself dies, peace takes its place. And from that peace comes clarity, the kind that cannot be shaken by praise or insult. That's why the Stoic doesn't boast when he wins and doesn't despair when he loses. He simply continues, unattached, unbothered, unbreakable. The destruction of ego is not the death of self, it's the rebirth of strength. For only when the noise of pride fades can you hear the whisper of wisdom, and from that whisper emerges the next law, the one that perfects the Stoic mind. The law of control over emotion, now the Law 7. The law of emotional mastery. Control the inner storm. The seventh Stoic law is the crown of discipline. You cannot control what happens, but you can always control how you respond. To the untrained, emotions are masters. To the Stoic, emotions are servants. This doesn't mean he feels nothing. It means he feels everything, yet remains unmoved. Most people are prisoners of impulse. A single insult can ruin their day. A single loss can destroy their spirit. A single failure can make them question their worth. They live like leaves in the wind, carried by every gust of emotion. But the Stoic is different. He stands like a mountain. The wind may roar, but it cannot move him, because he has learned the one art that frees every human being, the art of emotional control. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." It sounds simple, yet this is the hardest truth for the human mind to accept, because we want the world to change before we find peace. We want people to act differently before we calm down. But the Stoic reverses that. He finds peace first, then acts from it. The Stoic knows that emotion is energy, neither good nor bad until you give it direction. Anger can destroy you, or it can drive you. Fear can paralyze you, or it can sharpen your senses. Sadness can drown you, or it can deepen your understanding of others. Emotion is not the problem. Attachment to it is. Seneca said, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than necessary." This means most of our pain doesn't come from the event itself, but from our reaction to it. Our endless replaying of it in the mind, our stories about what it means. If yes, he acts with calm precision. If no, he releases it instantly. This practice transforms the ordinary man into an unshakable one, because once you stop being ruled by emotion, you become immune to manipulation. No insult can provoke you. No praise can control you. No chaos can confuse you. The world still storms around you, but inside, there is silence. That silence is power. The Stoic doesn't chase emotional numbness. He chases emotional mastery. He feels anger but does not lash out. He feels sorrow but does not sink. He feels fear but does not flee. His emotions serve him, not the other way around. And that control doesn't make him less human. It makes him more, because he no longer acts out of impulse but out of intention. He no longer reacts. He responds. Imagine walking through a world where chaos screams, yet you remain still. Where people insult you, betray you, doubt you, and you respond with reason, not rage. That's not weakness. That's power. The kind of power no one can take away. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them." In other words, nothing outside you has the power to hurt you, only your interpretation does. The Stoic rewires that interpretation until his first instinct is calm, until his automatic response to pain is patience, until, even in the face of injustice, he acts not from emotion, but from principle. That's when the transformation is complete, when the mind becomes a fortress, and every emotion that enters it must kneel before reason. This is the state of the mentally unbreakable. Not a man who feels nothing, but a man who has trained himself to rule over what he feels. And with this power, this inner sovereignty, comes the final Stoic law, the one that binds all the others together. The law that turns philosophy into a way of life, the ultimate rewiring of the human mind, now the last. The law of acceptance. Amor Fati, love your fate, the eighth and final Stoic law, is the heart of everything. Amor Fati, love your fate, not endure it, not tolerate it, love it. This is the moment where the Stoic stops fighting life and starts flowing with it, where every tragedy becomes training, every loss becomes learning, every setback becomes sacred, because the Stoic finally understands the universe does not happen to you, it happens for you. Everything you face is sculpting you, forging you, tempering you into something greater. Every hardship is a test, every test a teacher. Most people resist life. They want control, predictability, comfort. They pray for smooth seas. Yet it is the storms that make sailors strong. They curse the obstacles, not realizing those very obstacles are the path. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything thrown into it." That's the Stoic. Whatever life throws, pain, failure, betrayal, he burns it into fuel. Nothing can destroy him because he refuses to see anything as destruction. The Stoic doesn't ask, "Why me?" He says, "Try me." He doesn't say, "I wish it were different." He says, "This is exactly what I needed." Because he knows, if you love only the good parts of life, your love is conditional. But when you love all of it, the suffering, the loss, the confusion, you are finally free. Freedom is not getting what you want. It's wanting what is. Think of it. How unbreakable can a mind become when it sees every failure as fortune, every pain as purpose? That's the secret. You can't break a man who has fallen in love with everything that happens to him. When others complain about the rain, he smiles, because the rain reminds him of the storm he's already survived. When others feel envy, he feels gratitude, because he knows the measure of life is not what you have, but what you become. When others collapse under pressure, he stands tall, because he's not waiting for peace. He is peace. Amar Fati is not passive acceptance, it's active embrace. It's the courage to say, whatever comes, I will not just endure it, I will use it. And that mindset makes you undefeatable. Because once you stop resisting life, you stop suffering. Pain still exists, but it no longer owns you. Setbacks still happen, but they no longer shake you. The Stoic doesn't hope for an easier world, he trains for a stronger mind. This is the final rewiring. Where the mind becomes not a battlefield, but a temple, where every emotion, every experience, every loss is met with gratitude. Marcus Aurelius, near the end of his life, wrote, "Everything suits me that suits your designs, O universe. Nothing comes too early or too late, but in your own time." That is Amar Fati. The total surrender of ego, the total mastery of self. When you reach this point, nothing external can define you. You no longer live to impress, to control, or to chase. You simply are, still, focused, free. That is the Stoic way. Not coldness, not detachment, but deep acceptance. The kind of acceptance that makes your heart calm and your mind indestructible. So remember this, fool. You don't need to conquer the world to become unbreakable. You only need to conquer the self. And once you do, the world bends to your will. Amar Fati, love your fate, because it was always leading you exactly here. Thanks for watching, and wait until next time.